This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis, coming to you from my hotel room before I head out for Podcast Movement Evolutions. We'll get to that in a minute, but first, the download is brought to you by Podscribe. You can find out more at podscribe.com. And now, let's get into this week's news. Podcast Movement Evolutions at South by Southwest kicks off today. Podcasting has descended on South by Southwest 2026. Today, Saturday and Sunday, Podcast Movement Evolutions has taken over the venue SKYBOX on 6th. No South by Southwest badge required, no extra ticket. The only limitation is space, with a 400-person capacity, plus an overflow space with room for 350 plus more. South by Southwest badge holders do get priority access. Registration is still live, and you can and should fill it out. The link is in today's newsletter. In addition to the curated panels, networking events, and keynotes, this year features several live performances. Tonight, Friday, starting at 6 p.m., the main stage will be taken over by live tapings of Table Read, Scalable Podcast, and Broken Record, the latter having a special guest star in the form of Maya Hawke. Tomorrow night, Companion will be celebrating the spirit of their podcast slate with Companion Presents In Good Company. Starting at 7 p.m., the night will feature live performances fitting the tone of their shows. There will be a conversation with actor Penn Badgley, performances from Ayana Butterfly, JJ in the Mood, and a headliner set from Andy Grammer. You can find the full schedule for Podcast Movement Evolutions at evolutions.podcastmovement.com. The bigger picture behind Apple HLS as a police car drives by outside. Last month, Apple announced HTTP live streaming. HLS distribution is coming to Apple Podcasts. Acast, Amazon's Art19, Triton Digital's Omni Studio, and SiriusXM Media, which includes AdsWiz and Simplecast, have all been announced as launch partners for Apple Podcast HLS distribution. Sounds Profitable founder Bryan Barletta zooms out from the technical specifics of the announcement to look at what this means for the industry. Apple bringing HLS to Apple Podcasts doesn't just impact podcasting. Typically, companies implemented HLS internally, owning both hosting and receiving apps. The Apple Podcast implementation connects a publicly available app to multiple distribution hubs. This puts control back in the hands of hosting platforms, control that felt like it might be slipping away from podcasting in recent years. Here's a quote from Barletta, quote, "This announcement changes a downward spiral of ownership that so many of us didn't believe could be reversed. So let's buy into it whatever way we can and see how far we can take this momentum," end quote. Apple's HLS announcement for Apple Podcast also opens the door to external uses across industries. What does the world look like if a big multimedia publisher like Sony wants to use HLS to distribute their music out to Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube Music, or their movies to Netflix, HBO, Disney+? Podcasting should ask not who watches video on Apple Podcasts, but instead, how many creators and rights holders across industries will adopt RSS-inspired HLS? The most effective podcast ad is one people actually hear by Jonas Woost. Woost, curious about the average listener retention on podcast episodes and how it impacts podcast ads, presents data calculated from over 100,000 podcast episodes. On average, audiences on Apple Podcasts and Spotify complete 76% of a podcast episode. A quote from Woost, quote, "This blended average is impressive, but it hides details. Strong episodes pull the average up, while weaker episodes drag the average down. The standard deviation is quite high, which means individual episode performance is highly variable. There's no guarantee a specific episode will perform anywhere near the average. Ad buyers should take care not to be misled," end quote. When zoomed out, the data shows a correlation between episode length and average listen time. Episodes lasting 30 minutes or less average 85% listen time, 30 to 60-minute episodes average 83% listen time, and 60-plus minutes episodes average 65%. Woost argues publishers should share listen time statistics more often with advertisers to demonstrate audience loyalty and editorial quality. Advertisers should request listen time numbers to plan effective campaigns. More influential than influencers: how podcasting is redefining media impact in Singapore. Acast has published a new Singapore edition of Podcast Pulse, finding 97% of Singaporean podcast listeners surveyed say a podcast has changed their mind about a topic. By comparison, the global median is 84%. 52% of local listeners now rate podcasters more credible than journalists, 50%, and YouTubers, 48%. The study also notes that podcasters lead significantly on honesty, 69% versus 31%, and trustworthiness, 64% versus 36%, compared to social-first talent. Commercially, 69% of listeners have considered a brand for the first time because of a podcast, and 67% have made a purchase after a host recommendation. Acast frames this data as a wake-up call to traditional marketing methods that favor broad reach over pursuing deeper connections with specific audiences. Here's a quote from Acast CEO Greg Glenday. Quote, "This data from Singapore is a wake-up call for the entire media industry. When brands consider podcast a content channel, they are looking for the most powerful persuasion engine in the marketing mix. Singapore provides the blueprint for how brands can stop renting fleeting attention on social and start earning unrivaled trust in podcasting." End quote. The Timber Awards discounted submission deadline extended. Update your calendars. Submissions to Vox Topica's The Timber Awards, which opened on February 2nd, have had a few key dates updated. The discounted submission fee period has now been extended to March 20th. The full-price final submission deadline is April 17th, with judging taking place from April to June, and winners will be announced June 15th. Finally, it's time for quick hits. These are articles I've covered throughout the week that are still worth including in your weekend reading. They just didn't fit in the top stories today. First up, AdsWiz has announced the rollout of direct YouTube publishing and unified analytics for Simplecast Enterprise and professional users. Videos uploaded to the service will now also generate an audio file that's automatically distributed via RSS to audio podcast platforms. And once the new feature is rolled out, we'll also distribute video to Apple Podcasts via HLS. The Hollywood Reporter covers a Moffett-Nathanson analysis that predicts YouTube became the world's largest media company by revenue last year. Co-Host has unveiled Show Analytics Manager, a new feature in their prefix product that allows brands and podcasters to access dashboards covering downloads, unique listeners, and audience profiles. Earlier this week, Podbean announced via email they are discontinuing their dynamic ad insertion offering in all European markets and the UK. And RSS.com co-founder Alberto Batella published a new blog breaking down why RSS.com has implemented an AI content disclosure checkbox for podcast episode uploads, and he shares a short questionnaire for podcasters unsure if they should check that box. That was the download recap brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know I went through the stories fast, so just remember, if you click the link in your show notes, that'll take you to today's episode post where all the links live. You can also subscribe to the newsletter version to get it sent to your inbox every single episode. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis, using a no mono microphone in my hotel room. Shout out to No Mono and their processing. Our producers are myself, Bryan Barletta, and Tom Webster. And as always, special thanks to you for sticking with me as I brought you the top stories you might have missed from this past week in the business of podcasting. Robot.
Download complete.